Welcome to Rule the World, the art and power of storytelling. Storytelling is what connects us as humans, and for brands, it is no different. A well-told story can effectively position your brand in the minds and hearts of your audience, and can convert thoughts and feelings into results and revenue. On this show, we dive into the unique and recurring principles of world-class storytellers from every walk of life to help you level up your storytelling skills and knowledge to drive real, measurable results for you and your organisation. Here's your host, Paul Furlong.
Well, hello and welcome to Rule the World, the art and power of storytelling. My name is Paul Furlong, Creative Director at Opus Media. Today's guest is Robin Ridgley, Managing Director of Curovo Ltd, a brand, culture and communications consultancy based in the Northwest. Robin's passion is brand culture within organisations, and his philosophy is engaged, positive, happy people make workplaces better for everybody. He believes that internal communication and brand culture should be placed at the heart of the organisation, and that utilising organisational storytelling is the key to embedding loyalty and trust between colleagues, which ultimately leads to a great service for customers. So hi Robin, thanks for joining us today.
Hi Paul, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Are you okay?
I'm very well.
Excellent. So why don't we start with you telling me a little bit about you and what it is that you spend your time doing?
Well, it's quite a funny story, really. I kind of stumbled into what I do today from all of my experiences and all the kind of places I've worked. And I think that's probably something that's really important about what I believe makes organisational storytelling and the way we tell stories within organisations really important. I think for me, my kind of first kind of feel for this was when I worked for Telewest, now Virgin Media. I was a bit of a young lad out of college. I'd done communications at A-level and I just wanted to earn some money. So I was really fortunate to land a job with Telewest about opening some retail stores that they were going to do in Preston. One of them was in Preston where I live. And unfortunately, that never happened, and due to a number of factors. But one of the things that I was really passionate about was actually trying to help that organisation achieve some of its objectives. They had a promotional vehicle, an £80,000 promotional vehicle, sat in the car park, and it wasn't doing anything. So a mate of mine who became my best man at my wedding, we put a proposal together to take that out on the road and tell the story of why people wanted to engage and take up cable TV and phone. And it was really weird because part of that was me getting dressed up as a character that they had at the time called Cable Cat. And it was a really, really interesting kind of story for me, because what it actually did was it gave me the ability to actually develop a kind of a way of actually putting across the message, and we took this van all over the Northwest, and it actually what was really, really important was the people that actually gave the trust to me to do this really wanted to change the way the story was, and that was my kind of first dip into that, and unfortunately that gave me the opportunity to go and work on some really amazing projects. So creating the first broadband internet service in the UK, working on the Disney Channel, which was fascinating. There is a story there around the Disney Channel. One of the funny stories, I suppose, when you think you're getting everything right and the story's going well, to be let down by the technology. That was one of the things that happened there. So we actually did all the marketing, did all the story, got loads of people engaged and really up for it. And then the day that it launched, we got a black screen. And that for me, again, some of the things within the way that you do this, some of the things are outside of your control. And that's one of the things that I learned quite a lot early on, is some of those things are outside your control, but you try and make sure that you're in control of the story, I suppose. And that led me, fortunately, I suppose, into social housing. So I stumbled into social housing because I'd actually worked in contact centres, and I actually developed 2 contact centres for 2 different housing associations. And what that actually showed me is that the public sector is a rich area for stories, and it's a rich place where both the private sector and the public sector could learn lots from each other. Because I'm absolutely believe that a great story connects people. It causes them to feel something, it causes them to think something, and then hopefully do something. And within that environment, it was massively important, because when you're talking to somebody on the phone, it's like you're telling the story of who you are as an organisation. So I was very fortunate to do that. And then I actually ended up at Community Gateway Association based here in Preston. And the journey there was around something called Purple People, which is something that we can talk about and developed and actually is why I'm doing what I'm doing today, because it was about creating a brand culture through organisational storytelling.
So can you explain then, you touched on it there, that a good story will make people feel, think and do. Can you explain in a bit more detail about why story is so important when it comes to organisations and their storytelling and their brand?
Yeah, I think the main thing for me is, if you look at any organisation in any sector that is successful, they normally have a great story to tell. It's something that people connect with. It's something that they have in common. I think the big thing for me is it's having that kind of consistency, and actually, people will actually feel something if there's a good story. You are actually, when you buy something, normally it's because one or two things. You're actually interested in the product because it's something that you need, or something's actually ignited a spark inside you to actually say, do you know what, I really, Apple's a prime example. There's people that love Apple and the people that hate Apple. The people that love Apple will tell you it's because of who Apple are. Same with Virgin. Virgin was a prime example for me about how that can happen. Richard Branson took over Telewest, and he actually said to everybody who actually was going to be involved, you need to feel part of who we are as an organisation. You need to feel our story. You need to actually embed that within yourself so that you can actually demonstrate that through what the service that you provide. So it is that connection. It's a massive connection between who you are as an organisation, the products or the services that you sell, and then the story that you actually put out there.
And so you talk about the fact that there are kind of three main elements to telling a good story. What would they be?
I think for me, it's always been about having a great vision, a great mission, and the values of the organisation. That is a massive starting point for what I do. It's the thing that you can actually get under the skin of an organisation, and I think you can absolutely tell the story of that organisation just by walking through the door. You walk through the door and you can get that feel. And there's been a number of times when I've walked in the door and thought, oh, this is going to be a great story, because you get that feeling from the day one. That also comes from having great leadership and having a place where brand culture is developed. And so there is a real kind of emphasis on developing that within the organisation. And then I also think there's a real consistency and an approach to the way the story is told, because you can tell a story, but if it doesn't have a beginning, middle and end, then sometimes you get lost, and it gets a bit lost on the way. So you do need to have a consistent approach to the way you tell the story.
So I wonder if we can break each of those elements down a little bit for us. We hear all the time vision, mission, values being something that should go into business plans and stuff like that. But I do wonder how many companies actually have vision, mission and values. Could you talk about how, very briefly perhaps, how a company can start to think about developing those if they don't have one, or maybe they've got one that's quite outdated?
Yeah, and I think this comes back to kind of a story that I can tell about my own personal story, I suppose. So I walked into Community Gateway Association in 2007, and the organisation had a really strong set of values. The organisation was massively engaged with its clients, through its tenants, and the way that organisation set themselves up had actually got that embedded within it. But that was kind of 5 years down the line. And one of the things that was really great about the project that I was involved in was about actually how can you actually take a vision, take a mission and the values, and actually turn it into a more powerful story. So I agree with you. I think one of the things is that a lot of the time you walk into organisations and you see their vision, mission and values either within a document that they have or on the wall. The only way that you'll ever know whether that's actually being utilised or it's been embedded is, one, are people telling the story that is what it says on the tin? Are they actually being people that actually demonstrate that through behaviours? And I think sometimes starting from scratch is quite nice, but it's more difficult when you've actually had something there that's actually been there for a while. And I think actually taking a step back and reviewing and actually working through with leaders within the organisation and actually saying, are we actually saying what we're doing? Are we actually saying to not only our colleagues but also our customers about who we are as an organisation? And the stories that we tell are massively important through that. So I absolutely believe that you can actually do that by having that kind of real kind of thought piece done right at the front end. I utilise the cultural web quite a lot, so you can actually take people through a cultural web exercise which talks about the stories of the organisation, which talks about the power structures, which talks about the symbols of an organisation. Lots of things make up a great story, and you can do that by getting down to the nub of it through doing something like that cultural web piece.
So how does that cultural web piece work? What does that look like, or where can that be found for people who are thinking we need to have another go at our vision, mission, and values?
Yeah, interesting enough, it's one of those things that is out there on the web. You can just type in cultural web. It's absolutely there, and I can provide you with all the links, and you can put that out with the podcast. Absolutely. I think what the cultural web actually does is it absolutely helps you in the paradigm. It's the paradigm of who you are as an organisation. So it starts off. Basically, you've got stories, symbols, power structures, organisational structures, control systems, and rituals and routines. And the big thing is that you actually talk to the people that matter. So when we talk about stories, it's about past events, and it's about what people talk about. It's what they immortalise within an organisation says a great deal about what it values and it actually perceives. So when you go through this exercise, you shouldn't just do this with the leadership team. You should do it with the people on the front line who are actually the ones that are delivering the service majority of the time. Because the questions that you ask within this is very much about what stories do people currently tell about the organisation? What's the reputation that's being communicated with the community or your customers and other stakeholders? And what do those stories say about what we believe in? So you get a real picture right up front about what the organisation's kind of overall feel is. And then when you've done all of those, you go back and you actually go, right, now that we've done what it's like today, what do we want it to be like tomorrow? And you run and you go through that, and you actually redo the whole cultural web based upon that premise. You actually go and actually say, so what do we want the stories to be? What do we want the symbols to be? How do we want the power structures to feel? Control systems, how are we going to make sure that people understand that? And then also around rituals and routines, what can we change to make things different? So yeah, it's a powerful tool. It's out there. It's been out there for a number of years. It's probably around 30, 40 years old, the cultural web. And for me, what it absolutely does for me is it gives me my base to be able to develop something for the organisations that I work with.
So once you've done that, is that when you move into the second of the elements, which is the leadership and brand culture?
What that does is this gives you that baseline to work from, and I think the majority of times the way that things like organizational storytelling, brand culture, the way those things get embedded are through leadership. And we're not talking. Yes, we're talking that I've been incredibly fortunate to work with some amazing leaders. But one of the most rewarding things is to work with the people that actually are the people that go out and do the work and because one of the things, they tell different stories. That and it's really interesting. The cultural web is a really interesting feedback tool as well. It allows you to feed back the reality of the organization to the exec team. So they have the kind of, they are the guardians of that organization's culture, and they need to be able to tell other people what other people within the organization what that's like. But they need to be met halfway by the people that are actually delivering what they want them to deliver against their corporate objectives. So absolutely, brand culture is a huge part of the next stage within the process, because it actually leads you to where the exciting destination that you want to get to. So yeah, it's not just about putting some posters up on the wall. It's actually the day-to-day. What's it like to work in this organization? What are we going to say about how it feels? Because it also helps with other things. So stuff like that also helps with recruitment, retention, learning and development opportunities. It just is that kind of all-encompassing kind of thing that helps you actually then move on to the last one, which is the consistency part. Because you can't do all of this and then forget about it. It's massively important that this becomes, planned. There is actually something it's kind of that golden thread. I know people talk about this golden thread, but from a comms and internal comms perspective, it's about working very, very heavily with HR, learning development, and bringing this together as a kind of whole package. So for me, it's massively important that those three elements are kind of linked together.
So I'm really interested in the consistency of how the story is told.
I think what there is, if there's actually a buy-in from a number of sources, a number of people, and they are actually feel that they're actually, I mean, the biggest thing for me is actually you need to feel part of this story. You have to believe that you are actually part of it, and you actually have some say in how this story is told. And I think giving that across through things like the cultural web and through actually saying to people, you're a massive part of this story, we want you to tell your part of it, gives that consistency. Because I think one of the things that tends to happen is internal comms is run out the comms and marketing team, or it's run out the internal communications team. And sometimes that can actually be a great thing, because who knows better than what the internal stories are within the organization. The majority of the time, though, a lot of internal comms teams struggle to get stories because they haven't engaged, or there's a lack of engagement with other parts of the business. So for me, getting lots of people around the table who actually will have an influence on what the story is a massive part of what I do. And that's part and parcel of why we do the cultural web, is to actually understand who those people need to be involved in the story.
So obviously the cultural web is one of the tools that you use to start getting these stories out there. What are the other tools that you would use to get the story out there?
I think for me, people are, we just said it, haven't we? We said that people are the most important part of that. That's also your customers. because they have a massive part to play in the story that you actually want to get across. Because if you've got a strong storytelling ethos and you've got strong vision, strong mission and values, and it's being all lived and breathed, then that should reflect on what customers actually feel and the sense that they feel from the organisation. So they can also be part of the storytelling process. There's no reason why you shouldn't use that story to actually help with your external brand development as well. I think these days there is a multitude of channels that you can use. We know social media is a massive part of everyday life now. There are good uses of social media, and there's also sometimes the not so good. It's finding the right thing that suits your brand personality and your brand culture, I suppose. There's lots of great new internal tools now. I've seen and utilised and implemented Yammer at a number of organisations, which has actually brought dispersed organisations together through the power of storytelling. So bringing people together by actually allowing people to tell the story of what's going on in their area of the business through that purpose is been fascinating, because it's usually the people in an organisation that you don't get to hear from very often that have some of the greatest stories ever. And Yammer is one of those tools. And you may have seen recently, Microsoft have launched something called Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft Teams has been that kind of bridge between kind of Yammer and SharePoint. So it's more of a collaborative workspace. So you could get teams together and you can actually allow them to start talking together and start building some of the things that you need to be able to tell the story, really. And then probably finally, on the tools side, I think the quote "content is king" is the most relevant here from a tool perspective. You can't do any of this without having the right content. And I think the approach that I tend to take on this is you just need to get the right people who are passionate about what we're trying to achieve, and content will come if you give them the opportunity to develop it. If you try and develop content that isn't relevant to them, or they haven't had some input into that, then you're never going to get that kind of buy-in for what you're trying to achieve. So it's massively important that they feel that content is in their domain as well, and content development is in their domain.
And when you're developing the content, do you have a way of developing the story itself when you put it into the content? You talked before very briefly about story must have a beginning, middle, and end. Is there a way that you structure that story when it's being told, or does that depend on which channel or which kind of content you're using?
I think you can't go wrong without having a bit of a plan. I think there needs to be something there that you can hang on to. You can't just go out there, and I don't think you can just go out there and go, I said I was going to create this today. I think there needs to be a structured plan. And I think one of the things is stakeholder analysis is massive, and that's a big word, isn't it? Stakeholder analysis, but it is actually just understanding the right channels for the right audience. That for me is key to the success. So if you're talking to people within a contact center, understanding what's going on in their world, I will allow you to actually develop content that is relevant to them. So yes, having a strategic plan or comms plan or whatever you want to call it is massively important, but it shouldn't restrict you. I think that's something to actually acknowledge as well. Yes, you've got goals and objectives, and you understand what your messages are, and you understand what you're going to use to put those messages out. But it shouldn't restrict you from being a bit wacky and innovative. It really shouldn't, because I think some of the greatest things that I've ever been involved in, from a comms perspective and from a storytelling perspective, are the things that have just happened organically. And have happened because people have had ideas, And I think you should never, ever stop idea creation from happening, because you can try something and it might not work. So what? You've tried something different. And there's sometimes when you try things and it's the thing that sparks the catalyst for everything else. And I've had moments over the last 10 years that you would never have dreamed that something so simple or something so kind of different would make a difference, but it does. And I think that's the other thing as well. The people element of that storytelling tool is massive, because the people can actually bring you ideas that you might never have thought of.
So do you think you could give me, now that we've talked through all of that, a definition of brand culture?
Wow, there you go. There's one for you. I think for me, brand culture is very much about the feel of an organization. Like I said, right near the beginning of this, you can tell the culture of an organization the moment you engage with it, whether that be digitally through the web or over the phone, but for me, especially in the line of work that I'm in, it's very much about walking in the door and getting that absolute feel for who they are. And those water cooler moments, the chats that you have with people. What's it like here? What is the usual kind of norm around here? Because you get to know how you can actually either influence the culture or actually strengthen some of the areas that because that's another thing as well for brand culture. I don't think there's a clear definition. I write about this, I kind of talk about this, but it's brand culture is what it needs to be and what it needs to be right for the organization that you're in. You can't put a defined definition on brand culture on an organization, because that organization has a unique brand culture. You just need to actually develop that, and you need to actually develop that with the people that matter the most, and that's the people that work in the organization.
Well, these have been really excellent points for us to work on, and hopefully really helpful for those who are going to be listening to the podcast. I wonder if I could ask you my usual 3 rapid fire questions, if that's okay, Robin?
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so who do you think of when you hear the word story, and why do you think of that person?
The person I think of the most is a chief exec that I've worked with. Her name is Diane Bellinger, and she was the chief executive of Community Gateway Association in Preston. She's the person that has given me the opportunity to do what I do today. She started with Community Gateway Association right at the beginning and has developed that organisation story. She retired about a month ago, and the biggest compliment I can give her is that the people in the room, there were more people who came to see her because she'd actually done something for them, for them personally, that has allowed them to go on and develop themselves, do their own things. Me being one case in point. Developing the brand culture, or allowing the brand culture to be developed at Community Gateway, was one of the biggest projects and biggest achievements I've ever had. And I will be ever grateful for that, because she allowed me to tell a story. It was not her story, it was the story of everybody within that organisation. And the results speak for themselves. They basically, the organisation, after doing all the work that we did, entered the best companies times 100, entered in the first year at 37, which was massive, never even done this before, and they entered in the 37. And some of the work that we'd done got an extra special award for innovation, which was brilliant. The year after, we got 17, and we moved up from 37 to 17. But the biggest thing is that we took a break because we didn't think that, we needed to make sure that this had been embedded. And it was through Diane that we did that. And we brought some new people on board, especially from a very, very specific part of the business, some repairs teams that we brought on board who didn't have any cultural kind of awareness. And we felt we needed to take time with them to make them feel part of the organisation. And the year that we came back to Best Companies, we became the 4th best not-for-profit organisation. So I can't kind of tell you how important that Diane was in part of what my story is.
And so can you recommend any good books or websites or blogs or podcasts, anything like that about storytelling that you've come across?
I think I must admit, LinkedIn is a massive source for me. I've read Richard Branson's book. Losing My Virginity was one of those books where and again, he's a love and hate character. There's a load of people that go, oh God, he's an absolute legend, and those that go, I'm not so sure. But I think one of the things that you do get from his books, specifically, is that passion. And we talked about being passionate about what you do. I don't think there's anybody more passionate about his own brand, not just his own brand, but the brands that he has, and you can tell that specifically within those books. So I'd recommend going reading his books, absolutely.
And finally then, Robin, where can we find out more about you? Where can we find you online?
I'm all over LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, which is www.curovo.co.uk. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Robin Ridgley. You can find me there. I'm usually post lots of stuff up there, interesting stuff, all the stuff we talked about today, and my experience, I think, because I think that's important. I think experiences are massive when it comes to this, and I just like sharing some of those things. So you can find me there as well.
Well, Robin, thanks for talking to us today. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you, Paul. That's been absolutely brilliant.
And we'll speak again soon.
Great.
Thanks, Robin. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Rule the World. Be sure to rate, review and subscribe to the show, and visit weareopusmedia.com for more resources based on today's topic, as well as access to more episodes that will help you develop your storytelling abilities. That's weareopusmedia.com. Thank you, and see you next time.